taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Nissan Sentra. First thing I'm going to point out, the steering wheel inside of the Sentra is comfortable. It's nice. And it is also heated. So down the center stack there's a button for you to toggle the heated steering wheel on or off. Not standard across the board, but still nice. It's available as an option. The steering wheel in the vehicle is going to be manual telescoping. So by your left knee, there's a release. Then you can go in, out, up and down. Find that perfect position. Once you do, click it in order to lock it back into place. And there are a series of different buttons that are available. But before I get there, the cluster screen can be adjusted. So there are a series of different buttons down by your left knee. So you've got an eco mode that you can turn on or off if you want more economically conscious driving. You can also adjust the brightness of the cluster screen. So if you want it brighter, darker, whatever the case may be. And then there's also a trip counter, so you can kind of jump in between different options there. If you're on A or B, you could do a push and hold in order to reset it back to 0 instead. Very straightforward, but I'll explain all the different icons there as we kind of get a little bit closer. So the steering wheel inside the vehicle, like I said, has a ton of different buttons. These are going to be for your cruise control. So you've got your cruise control distance indicator, and then toggle the cruise on or off. So you can toggle the cruise on. As you start driving, you then would push down in order to set it. You could then increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. If you wanted to temporarily pause the adaptive cruise, you could hit the cancel button, or you just hit the brake in order to cancel it temporarily, and then you can push up in order to resume instead. There's a distance indicator, so how close or far do you want to be away from the vehicle that's in front of you? I want you to think of it like a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type of a rule. So obviously if you were in 1, I would say 1 is good for just regular city streets. 2, I generally find is pretty good on the highway, but that's going to be a matter of personal preference. And then you can toggle the system on or off. But if you want a live demonstration of how the adaptive cruise control system works, you'll find it down in the description of this video. One thing that I recognized that you could do inside of Nissan vehicles that I didn't even realize at first is the flexibility to switch between either regular or adaptive cruise control. And it's very straightforward in order to make the switch. So if you were to toggle cruise control on or off, so that's the adaptive cruise, and you know it's the adaptive cruise because the car there has this tiny little indent there. And then you can also see the car that shows up in your driver assistance settings also has a little bar. That essentially means that you're in the adaptive cruise control mode. So if we turn it off and then push and hold for a second, you'll see it flip out. So it gets rid of the bar. That's essentially the distance indicator. But also along the very top instead, you can see that it switches out to regular cruise instead. So you'd then be able to set, and then you can increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. When you turn it off and then back on again, it defaults back to the adaptive cruise system. So I think it is kind of neat that you've got the flexibility to go either adaptive cruise or regular cruise control. I wish that there was some sort of an indication that you know that you're making the switch from one to the other. But if you're not crazy about the adaptive cruise, that's going to slow you down. You can just go old school cruise. But honestly, I find the adaptive cruise control system is a lifesaver sometimes. And I'll give you an example. Let's say if you're rolling on the highway and you're being an idiot rubbernecking at the accident that's happening across the opposite way. If the car in front of you starts to slow down with the adaptive cruise system turned on, yours is automatically going to brake. So it's a really good safety setting. Versus traditional cruise, if you rubberneck and you're turning to the side and you've got it set at 100 kilometers an hour, the car in front of you slows down, yours is not going to brake. So the chance of a rear front-end collision is higher. Now, there are different safety settings that you can enable for brake assist and things like that, but just use the adaptive cruise control system. In my opinion, that's the best way to go. There's a voice command prompt, so you'd be able to do things like change songs, radio stations as well. Lots of different options that are available. Then there's also a button for answering or hanging up on a phone call. There are no phones currently connected, but if there was, you'd be able to make phone calls that way, etc. Straightforward. Then you've got a series of other buttons along the bottom left, and that's going to be for changing between presets. So if we go to audio, actually, I guess you can even see it there. So you're jumping between different presets there if you wanted to. If you do a longer press and hold, it acts as a seek button instead. So it kind of does a slow seek up to the next available station, which is kind of nice. You've got a basic back button there as well. And then you've got your volume rocker there. So you can adjust your volume that way if you wanted to, or you could just use the volume rocker knob there instead. But there's no mute audio button whatsoever. So I mean, technically you could just push the audio off that way, but you can't temporarily mute if you wanted to. And then you've got a directional pad to control what's going on inside of that cluster screen. And there are a ton of different options that are available on the screen. So first thing I'm going to point out is that you've got your tachometer off to the left, speedometer off to the right-hand side. And then you've got your current kilometers that you've traveled, so your total odometer, how many kilometers you have left or miles you have left for your fuel. And then you've got your fuel gauge along the very bottom there as well. And then inside of the tachometer, there's also your current engine temperature. Along the very top, it's kind of hard to make out. I think I'm on max screen brightness even too, yeah. But you've got your current time and then the outside temperature on top of that. One thing I forgot, the sticks. So you've got your left one, which is going to be obviously for your blinkers. You can also flash at your high beams. Don't have the flexibility of adjusting out the lights, so keeping the high beams on when you're in the auto mode. So with auto mode engaged, if the vehicle recognizes it, it'll turn on the high beams and then it'll lower them before bringing them back on if it recognizes somebody's oncoming. But if you're in the regular light mode, you can push away in order to lock out your high beams instead. Either way, you can flash them if you want. You just can't permanently lock them out unless you're in the other mode instead. Stick on the right-hand side is going to be for that front windshield wiper. You're going to also be able to adjust out in the very middle. So see there how there's the option of sliding up and down. When you're in the intermittent level, it's how fast or slow is rain hitting the windshield. And it can adjust out that way for you instead, or you can go to one of the crazy options if you want to. And you're going to pull in towards you to get that wiper fluid going. Now, when you actually get into the cluster, there are a ton of options, but along the bottom, you've also got your current gear. So your reverse, neutral, drive, low gear, etc. When you're in reverse, or actually any of the other gears, you've got your rear park sensing system that'll show up. So the beeping that you get as you back up. But you're going to be using the dial pad along the left-hand side in order to move between all of the available options. Like I said, there are a lot. Starting off with your basic home screen, there are 3 sub-screens. So you've got like this calming mode instead. So if you just don't want distractions versus your digital speed. And then there's also the digital speed with other options. So you've got 2 unique layouts there. So if you wanted to have your basics there, so your radio presets versus if you wanted to have your average speed, push and hold OK in order to reset your average speed instead. I personally find this one's generally the better one, in my opinion. You've got fuel economy. It's going to start getting terrible just because I'm sitting here with the car on reviewing, but on the highway, I was averaging around 6.8-ish liters per 100, and then just sitting 7.8, so it's pretty economical at the same time. Not the best, it's not a hybrid, but still it's pretty good. Auto start stop, you can toggle that on or off down the center stack there. So what that means is that when it's turned on, if you come down to a complete stop, the engine might turn off temporarily. If that drives you nuts, you've got the flexibility to be able to disable it there as well. And then you can go between any of those options. You could push and hold the OK button there if you wanted to reset your fuel economy. There are different trip counters, so you've got your tire pressure there. I guess just one trip counter. So tire pressure, trip counter, and then your speed limit sign. If you wanted to reset your trip, I'm just going to push and hold OK, and that resets it for you. Then you've got your audio there as well, and that's kind of nice because you can push OK in order to jump between all of your available presets, and I guess your sources, I should say. And that's kind of neat because even going through, you've got the flexibility of being able to adjust your USB audio too. That's kind of neat. Nice. And then I guess it would be the same. Yeah. So if you're an AM, FM, it would jump either between presets or just a press and hold in order to be able to seek out instead. Nice. Scrolling out to the side, there's also the option for this screen. So there's not going to be anything exciting here until you start driving with the adaptive cruise control system on. And then you're going to have green highlight up there as you're driving. And then you're also going to have green along the screen there as well. Just again, for basic safety, letting you know that you're good to go. And then there are a series of other settings here. So your VDC, think of that like traction stability control. You can toggle that off. The only time you really want to toggle it off, though, is wintertime. So if you're starting to recognize that you're getting wheel slippage, like you can't get traction, turn that system off. And I guess a big benefit of having the system off is that your traction control is off, and you can see a few other safety warnings have kind of popped up there. But again, very useful to give you some added traction and stability in wintertime driving specifically. And moving down, and back to driver assistance settings, there are a series of options here. So lane departure warning. If you start to veer over into another lane without signaling, it's going to let you know that you're drifting over. So it's a good safety setting. There's a blind spot system on top of that. And the blind spot system, I think in the Nissan world, is kind of neat the way they do it. So along the side there, you've got this little icon, or this little thing. So hold on. Oh, it doesn't actually show it. Oh, okay, B-roll. All right, so that's kind of neat, but it is kind of cool that it shows you right inside the vehicle there. Moving back, there's emergency brake for front or rear. So if there's a pedestrian in front of you or an obstacle you don't see, it can slam on the brakes. And that's the same idea when you're reversing. If there's an obstacle behind you that you don't see, it'll slam on the brakes for you as well. It's actually really cool that that's available in the Sentra across pretty much all trims. Speed limit sign. So if there's a speed sign that's recognized, it's going to show right up in the cluster screen. The parking aid. Do you want to have the sonar, so the beeping that you get as you back up? Do you want to toggle that on or off? How loud do you want the volume to be? Actually, low is generally a good idea. Rear cross traffic alert. If you're backing up and somebody's coming perpendicular, so from the left or right, it's going to tell you of a potential collision. There are timer alerts and then low temperature alerts. So useful if you're in a colder climate, so it's going to let you know of potential icy roads as well. Eco mode, you've got the flexibility, so I was pointing it out down along the bottom there, so you can toggle your eco mode on or off. And then with the eco mode engaged, it's essentially what do you want it to do? So you can have it for cruise control, idle stop, and then do you also want to have your air conditioning on or off as well? Driver assist indicators, drive report, so it's more or less just like, are you driving the most economically conscious as well? And then you can view your history. So the very best was able to get 5.3 liters per 100, which I mean in the eco mode, that's actually pretty solid at the same time. Nice. TPMS settings. Do you want to be in PSI, KPA, bar, etc.? Clock, you've got the flexibility of adjusting it out. So do you want that military time instead? Or do you want that 12-hour mode? Do you want to set the clock up manually? Some basics for vehicle settings like lighting. Welcome light when you go to unlock the vehicle. Light delay. When you go to lock the vehicle, do the lamps just turn off? Or do they stay on for 30 seconds? I think it's up to 3 minutes. Yeah, up to 180 seconds. So you can lock the vehicle and then the headlamps will stay on for up to 3 minutes. So very good if you're walking a little bit further away in order to get home at night. And then when you're in the auto headlight mode, do you want it to turn on earlier, standard? Do you want it to turn on later on at night instead? And locks, I don't think there's anything exciting there. Selective unlock, yay or nay. When do you want the door to unlock? When you shift to park? When you turn the vehicle off? Or do you just never want the doors to automatically unlock? So useful if you live in a not so nice neighborhood, and just for general safety, I think that's a pretty good idea. And then do you want the horn to beep when you lock the vehicle? Your wipers, do you want it speed dependent? Rear door alert, so nothing overly exciting there. Maintenance, if you're doing maintenance yourself, so your oil control lets you know when you have to change out your oil, your filter, you can reset it. So useful if you're changing oil yourself. Customize the display a little bit, like there's not much, like you can see some basic information there. So blank screen versus fuel economy, your pedal gauge, idling. So it's essentially what screen do you want showing up there? I'm personally a bigger fan. Actually, the cruise is a pretty nice looking screen on that main screen. Welcome effects. When you turn the vehicle on, do you want to have those gauges and animations show up? Wiper guidance, nothing exciting there. Units, do you want to be in either kilometers, liters, miles per gallon, etc.? Tire pressure, KPA, PSI, bar, Celsius, Fahrenheit. Do you want to be in English, French, Spanish, or UK English? Few options available there, and then you can also do a factory reset. So if you're selling your vehicle, or if you're turning it in after you've taken it for a spin, you can just delete everything from the vehicle instead. So specifically from the cluster screen. The infotainment has its own little reset there as well, but if you want to walk through the infotainment system, you'll find it down in the description. But that's everything you need to know about the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Nissan Sentra.